The Transformers franchise has a long history of awesome toys, shows, movies, and my personal favorite, video games. With Transformers Rise of the Beasts out, I thought now would be a good time to rise up with my fellow bots and go back through the history of Transformers games for better or worse. As an added bonus, I'll be joined by a resident expert on the Transformers lore and my good buddy Mecha Z Reviews.
And as you can see, I love Transformers.
I am honored to be sharing this video with an absolute professional and someone who definitely won't do or say anything to tarnish the reputation of this family-friendly channel. Oh, the 80s. Teddy Ruxpin, Shrinky Dinks, salad bars at Pizza Hut, and Transformers Generation 1. The robots in disguise exploded into our lives in 1984 with a toy line, cartoon, and comic books. But we wouldn't get our first video game adaptation of the Battling Bots until 1985, and there were only 4 more games that came out that decade. Rookie numbers compared to Mario, who had 14 games between 1981 and 1985, but the first Transformers game in existence was appropriately, if a little simply named, The Transformers. It was developed by Liverpool-based studio Denton Designs and released on the Commodore 64, as well as the Sinclair Spectrum.
Wait. Sinclair Spectrum? What is that? Oh, so it's like a British Commodore 64.
The Transformers was a side-scrolling shooter in which players could switch between 5 playable Autobots, Optimus Prime, Jazz, Bumblebee, Hound, and Mirage, as they fought Decepticons and collected 4 parts of an Energon Cube to quell an energy crisis. Unfortunately, the Transformers video games didn't get off to the same great start that the toys and show did. This first game received middling reviews, and one of the game's own developers, Ali Noble, had this to say about the Transformers. It's really a personal thing, we all like different products, but I think Transformers was an embarrassment. Ugh. Unfortunately, this was also just the first in a long line of meh. After the Liverpoolian, that's a weird word. After the Liverpoolian developers had their shot, and yes, that is what you call people from Liverpool, Activision took over the following year and released The Transformers: Battle to Save the Earth, and Japanese publisher Takara put out Transformers: Mystery of the Convoy and Transformers: The Headmasters in 1986 and 1987, respectively, but only in Japan. Why only Japan, you might think? Well, because Takara actually created the toy line our Transformers comes from, Diaclone and Microchange. Hasbro just bought the rights to the toys and rebranded them for the West, renaming them to the Transformers, which means the Transformers are actually Japanese and we got the knockoffs. These games were, well, they were all pretty bad. Battle to Save the Earth had giant mechanical dinosaurs and kaiju-sized hippos because reasons. And the 2 Takara games are notorious for their extreme difficulty and just not being very fun. So with 4 swings and 4 misses, the Transformers video games went into an extended hypersleep, as the other parts of the franchise continued to grow in popularity over the years. Then, after 10 long years, we entered an entirely new era of Transformers. How about you take this one, Z?
Now it's time for Beast Wars, so get that G1 junk out of here. 1996 saw the launch of the most groundbreaking all-CGI show, Beast Wars. It starred an entirely new cast, including Harambe, the Rhino from Donkey Kong Country, Chester Cheetah, Master Splinter, and other hilarious references you might recognize. Hey now, don't laugh at them, they might look silly now because it is, but this was cutting-edge animation back in the day. This show won an Emmy for its contributions to daytime television. I haven't even gotten a YouTube plaque yet. Plus, what other show has a massive rat falling through the sky on top of a skydiving gorilla right in its opening? Plus, the Rise of the Beast wouldn't exist without this 90s CGI, so count your blessings. Unfathomable awesomeness aside, is that really in the script? The video games based on this new generation of Transformers didn't fare much better than what we had a decade before. This was 1997's Beast Wars on the PS1 and PC, a third-person shooter, and 1999's Transformers Beast Wars Transmetal on the PS1 and Nintendo 64, a fighting game. Both of them failed to hold a candle to the show that inspired them, and I'm really trying to get to the good stuff because I love Transformers. And realizing how bad most of these games are is really bumming me out.
This brings us to the first bright spark in the series' almost 20-year history, 2004's Transformers on the PS2. another very creative title. This Transformers game was developed and published by Atari, and was loosely based on the Transformers Armada series that was airing around the same time. It took you to interesting environments like the Amazon jungle and Antarctica as one of 3 Autobots, with the goal of collecting minicons that could imbue your character with new abilities. It also made references to Transformers the movie from 1986. It played great, and you fought Unicron as the final boss. The game was reviewed positively, was basically perfect in comparison to the rest of the games up to that point, though admittedly that bar's pretty low. For many Transformers fans, Transformers 2004 felt like a turning point. Unfortunately, a proud supporter of the American military, product placement, female bodies, and explosions came into the picture a year later in 2005. In the years following the release of Atari's Transformers game, Hollywood and Hasbro made a deal with Robo-Satan to create big-budget, live-action versions of Optimus and the gang for a series of films. And this being the mid-2000s, that could only mean one thing: bad video game tie-ins. Activision somehow landed the rights for the Transformers once more 20 years after the battle to save the Earth, adding them to the company's robust stable of licensed IP to make games for. The first game to come out of that deal was Transformers: The Game from 2007, which was followed by Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen in 2009. This was your standard movie tie-in fare though, a port for every available console in existence, with each one being developed by a separate studio, a narrative that more or less followed the events of the movie while taking some liberties so the game went on for longer than 2 hours, and a forced, crushingly short development timeline that is always symptomatic of games with this level of quality. The lead studios for both of those games, Traveler's Tales and Luxoflux, weren't even bad studios. They just didn't have enough time to make an actual good game. Those games would largely be forgiven soon after though, because Activision was also allowed to create games in their own continuity, outside of the movies, as part of their deal, which they did in 2010, and it's called Transformers: War for Cybertron. This is it, you guys. This was the one.
Oh, I want to take this one. Developer High Moon Studios had been working on War for Cybertron in secret for several years before its announcement, and their passion for the franchise definitely showed. It featured pulse-pounding run-and-gun gameplay with free transformations. There were separate Autobot and Decepticon campaigns, and the story High Moon developed was so good it is considered official canon by Hasbro itself in part of the aligned continuity. Also, after completing the Autobot story, you unlock RC as a playable character in the multiplayer escalation mode, which definitely wasn't my main reason for completing the game, but it definitely was. Listen, just hear me out. Look at her. And then take a look at my RC collection. Here's one, here's another one, another one. This is also technically an RC figure.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Down, boy. So finally, there was another banger of a Transformers game. 2 out of 12 isn't that bad, right? In fact, War for Cybertron was getting more good reviews than you could shake an Energon cube at, and you'd best believe Activision set High Moon to work on a sequel immediately. In a press release, the general manager of digital media and gaming for Hasbro at the time, Mark Fletcher, said, "This is the most highly rated critical success of any game that's had the Hasbro brand yet, and we're looking forward to a sequel in 2012. That was roughly 2 years away at the time of the announcement. Not ideal, but better than what other licensed games were getting in terms of dev time. And High Moon could probably make it work, or so we thought. I'm just kidding. No, the bad stuff is out of the way now. This was actually good. High Moon knocked it out of the park with Fall of Cybertron. They absolutely crushed it despite having their workforce split in half so they could also produce the tie-in game for Dark of the Moon, which managed to turn out no worse than the other Transformers tie-in games. Enough about that. For the sequel, all they had to do was continue the story they had started in War for Cybertron. But they went and made an overall better game and threw Grimlock in. Unfortunately, for all the success that can be directly attributed to them, High Moon never got to close out the trilogy of Transformers games they began. For some reason, Activision thought it would be a good idea to put High Moon in charge of the Deadpool game, instead of the third Transformers games that they earned. That sacred honor went to Edge of Reality, who created the dismally received Transformers Rise of the Dark Spark. That game was disjointed, buggy, and incoherent. But its worst offense? Trying to bridge the Michael Bay Transformers universe with High Moon's War for Cybertron universe. Rise of the Dark Spark effectively put the nail in the coffin for Transformers games, but Activision had to squeak out one more game while they still had the rights. So they commissioned Platinum Games to make the G1-themed Transformers Devastation, a fun but short brawler. Hey, it had a dodging mechanic similar to Bayonetta's Witch Time, which arguably makes everything better. Once the license had been safely removed from Activision's claws, and they scuttled back to the dark dank cave where they churned out licensed games, things died down for the Transformers yet again. 5 years passed, and then the turn-based strategy game Transformers Battlegrounds hit in 2020, and a VR shooter called Transformers Beyond Reality landed on PSVR in 2022. Battlegrounds is currently sitting at a 69 on Metacritic for the Switch.
69, that's the funny number.
But Beyond Reality is unfortunately cited as being short and bland. And that is the entire history of Transformers games.
Wait, but you left out the mobile games.
Nope, I have left absolutely nothing out. It's all here and accounted for. Everything that matters has been mentioned. Thanks again to MechZ for joining me today, and if you're a fan of the Transformers toys or anything Transformers, you should check out his channel, where he does reviews on Transformers toys and their bootlegs.